Hey there, friends and neighbors. I'm out here doing some foraging and I wanted to show you what I'm eating lately. So, this is a wild cherry and I'm really excited. I've been watching these, waiting for them to ripen. And now just over the last maybe half a week, they've started to develop some ripe cherries. They're not near as big as supermarket cherries. Oh, hello little ant. You know, I should have eaten him. He's edible too. I'm not a big fan of ants. They're not very big. They're about the size of a pencil eraser, and they're not as sweet as a supermarket cherry. They're kind of tart. Now I love them, and I find that most people, after about 3 or 4 cherries, they start to develop a taste for the wild ones. Some trees are rather unpalatable, but then other trees get, you know, almost what you might call sweet. The seed is not edible, and it's mildly toxic. It's not like deadly if you eat one or even several. Probably just give you a bellyache if you ate a whole bunch of them, but don't, you know, spit the seed out. So how do you identify a wild cherry tree? Well, you know, it looks a lot like a peach tree or maybe a plum too. They have these simple alternate leaves, so they go back and forth, and the leaves. Sorry, big guy, let me borrow one of these. The leaves have these little finely toothed edges all along the margin there. And you can't eat the leaves on these. You can't eat the bark. Now the bark has a medicinal purpose, but let's talk about that some other time. You don't eat it. Do anything with them you do with regular cherries. You probably want to add more sugar if that's your thing. They'll grow in a cluster, this sort of a drooping cluster. In the spring they have white blossoms. Delicious. One of the things we like to do is we'll collect a bunch of them and press the juice out of them, and then bake them into muffins, and they're real pretty. Well, let's go find some more stuff. This is American Beautyberry, and now these are not ready. They won't be ready to eat while I'm still out here doing all this foraging. But this is another plant that I've been using, and I use it every year when I go out. They have a very distinctive smell. It's a nice smell, and it's also well, it's nice to us. It's bad to bugs. It's a very good mosquito and tick and other bug repellent. It doesn't repel everything. I mean, obviously something's got to come pollinate these guys. But it's really good for ticks and mosquitoes, the ones that bother you. And you take some of the leaves and crush them and then rub them on you where the bugs are bothering you, or I'll stick them under my hat or in my pockets or under my wristwatch or things like that. The berries, they don't really have a great taste on the trail, but you can make a jelly or a syrup. I had more luck with the syrup, and that's a really unique flavor, and it's kind of pleasant, and it's very pretty too. It makes a really pretty color. These have these great magenta berries. Even if it doesn't have the berries though, you can still identify it by that smell. Any time of the year that you have bugs that bother you, at least here this works. I don't know if it works everywhere, but here, anytime you have bugs bothering you, you also have leaves of this plant that you can use to take care of those bugs. Okay, let's go. I see something over here. Let's go talk about that plant. Okay, this is a persimmon tree. This is another one I haven't been eating. I'm not showing you a lot of things that I'm eating on this trip, but I saw it, and look, I'm excited because this little baby persimmons, and they won't be edible for a while. They have to be just pretty much dead ripe, or they're so astringent they just pucker your mouth down into a coffee straw. But I did stop here for a reason besides the happy little persimmons. Smilax. If you take a look at this, these are easy to identify. These are sawbriars or catbriars, greenbrier, bullbriar. They go by a lot of names, but they all have the same pattern. It's a thorny vine. Really, it's a erect shrub, I think is how it's classified, or it makes a bramble. It's for most practical purposes, you would think of it as a vine, even if it's not technically one. But it's a thorny vine. It'll have alternating leaves. The leaf shape can vary greatly, but here's the pattern: is at every leaf there will be 2 tendrils coming out from it, and that's how you can ID the plant. So thorny, basically a vine, even if it's not, and then alternating leaves with 2 tendrils at each leaf. And how you harvest it is you grab it near the growing end and bend it over and pull, and if it breaks free, then that's tender enough to eat. If it doesn't, just move a little bit towards the growing end of the plant and do it again. These are edible raw or cooked. I like to cook them like asparagus, and they taste kind of like that. Although, I mean, for my survival foraging, I don't have access to all that stuff. Still, not bad. Better fried in oil with Parmesan and pepper. These are elders, as in elderberries. And they're in a sort of in-between stage now. Depending on where I go, they're sort of in between the flowering and the fruiting. But they'll make an umbel of white flowers. And the flowers are edible, and they have some of the medicinal aspects. And then once they turn into these little green unripe berries, then they're untouchable again for a while until they get ripe. So like I say, in most of the plants I'm in the in-between stages. But I have been eating some elder flowers. That's another one. And elderberry is another excellent medicinal plant. There's another place I've been foraging, in gardens. And no, I don't mean I've been stealing plants out of people's gardens. This is my parents' garden. I've been picking the weeds out of the garden, the edible weeds. So it's not cheating. Ha! Let me show you a couple of the weeds in here I eat. I'm looking for purslane, but I may have eaten all of it. Now, yeah, you gotta be barefoot. You gotta connect to the earth, you know. Hey, here's another little guy. This is lamb's quarters. Oh, hey, here's a little purslane that escaped me, but it's all scrawny and dead now. Poor thing. They have this reddish stem, and then they would have leaves, but that's not a good example. We need to find another one of these. Anyway, lamb's quarters, also called goosefoot, it's a chenopodium. It's called a lot of things, but it has this it's sort of the shape of a goose's foot, I guess, the leaf. And I mean, a lot of things have this sort of a shape of leaf. So how do we tell it apart? Well, it has this powdery, well, really it's a wax, but it looks like a powder on the top of the plant. And now, if you're in a garden where people spray and sprinkle like 7 dust or something, and you find powder on the top of a plant, don't eat that plant. But this one, that's totally edible. And that's another very mild and good and green tasting one. And it is a common, look, here's some more. It's a common garden weed. Normally, I'm right over here picking it. Yeah. And these will get up, you know, 4 or 5, maybe 6, well, maybe even taller than that, you know, feet high. But that is goosefoot, or lamb's quarters. And this is another really good nutritional plant. It has a lot of calcium. It's like 3 times the calcium of spinach. It's got a lot of important nutrients. You know, last week I focused more on calories because, well, you know, that's important. You've got to have energy to live. But I don't want to leave out the nutrients, the vitamins and minerals that are really, really abundant. This is where the wild plants shine. You don't get a lot of calories from wild plants overall. The exceptions are roots and fruits, what I like to say. But nutrient-wise, wow. You will not be vitamin deficient if you're eating a variety of wild plants. You're going to take all that health and you're going to have it inside of you. This abundant, rich, deep, nourishing health. Way better than if you eat at a supermarket. You know, the produce in our supermarkets is grown in soil that's very depleted of minerals. And they aren't as healthy as they used to be. The soils are depleted. Well, the weeds, they go out and they are nutrient accumulators a lot of times. A lot of these wild plants are. And they may have tap roots that go deep down and pull up more nutrients, more minerals for our bodies. Yeah, if you're eating a variety of wild plants, it's kind of hard to be mineral deficient. This happy little fella here is peppergrass, or poor man's pepper, or poor man's peppergrass. It's in the mustard family, and it has a spicy seed. This is if you're doing survival foraging and you don't have access to all your herbs and spices, it's nice to know the plants that can spice it up. I've still got plenty of violet leaves here, and you can make these into a stew. They're a thickener, but I just rather eat them raw. They're nice and clean tasting. This right here is a wild mint plant. Remember, mints have square stems, and the leaves are opposite, and they will go back and forth. And this variety has such a pleasant taste. Okay, some things will have that same mint pattern, and some mints will not have the mint pattern because plants don't read the plant books, right? But if it has the pattern, the square stems, the opposite leaves that go back and forth to switch 90 degrees, and if it smells like a mint, then it's okay. You can use that. And here's how we use this is we'll take the leaves and make a tea out of them. You boil some water, pour it over the leaves, let it steep. You probably want to cover that up to preserve the essential oils, the volatile oils in the mint plant. And then you have a really nice tea. And mint, just in general, mint likes to make your tummy feel better. So that's one of the good things about mint.
Ow!
This is common mallow, or Malva neglecta, and it's another great common green that you can just eat up raw. Most of the foods, most of the greens I do raw if I can, just because it's easier. And since I'm doing survival foraging, I don't have access to a lot of the same seasonings or butter that I would put into it. But these are good. Even the bigger leaves, they're not too tough. It's a really nice, soothing plant too. It's mucilaginous. it has some mucilage in there. It's not gross like that sounds. It's just a soothing plant. Now behind the mallow, we have a dandelion right there, and dandelions are super nutritious. It's a little too hot for dandelions around here right now. They'll come back a little later on. This is lemon balm, and it will escape from gardens. This one isn't. This is my own garden. But it makes a nice, wonderful tea. It's another mint family plant. I've got my echinacea here, and I don't use them for food, but I thought this might be as good a time as any to bring up responsible foraging. And echinacea is one of those plants that you really ought to grow in your garden because we can overburden them in the wild. There's an Ozark variety of echinacea around here, very beautiful, kind of a lilting, almost ghostly looking flower. It's very beautiful, but it's not super common, and it can't stand up to a lot of heavy harvesting, especially since people dig up the roots on these most of the time. The flower also works, but the root is stronger. But yeah, if you go up and you dig the roots, well, then that plant is gone. It's not going to come back, and we can overburden the plants, and then we won't have them anymore. So I know this isn't really food foraging, but since I'm out here, I thought I'd mention it. Grow your own echinacea. One thing I'm doing with blackberries to get ready for the trip is to dehydrate some right here. And so that way I won't have to start over with completely zero food resources. I'll have a little bit, and then it'll just be whatever I can find on the trail. And then let me show you one more really fun or really gross one, and that is some tomato worms, or some hornworms. These are from my mother's house. She has some tomato plants that were afflicted, and this is exciting because I've never eaten these before. I have some experience, but not with these particular insects, and that's going to be, well, it's always an experience when I try a new bug. So I can't eat them right now. I have to take them with me on the trail because they have to purge their digestive tracts because they've been eating the tomato plant, and while tomatoes are edible, the green parts of the plant are not. Fun. So be watching for that video. Here's some more of the dayflower that I was showing you over there. This poor guy is so dry. He said, I need water and insects are eating me. But this is a really hardy plant, and they're going to be fine. As soon as it rains, they're going to perk back up and probably have twice as many shoots. But right next to it is a very similar looking plant. It looks a little happier. But this is a variety of knotweed. Like K-N, knot. Not like not a weed. Well, I don't count it as a weed. Anywho. It's not flowering right now, but these have a pretty little pink seed spike or flower spike. And most knotweeds are really hot and peppery, and it's kind of a fun trick to play on your friends to have them take a bite of it. Lady's thumb, the way you identify it, and it's hard to see here. Some of the others in town, they have a lot better, a lot darker marking, but the ones in my yard, it's a kind of a faint dark mark right there. Yeah, it's really hard to see it on this video, isn't it? But there's just a little darker green shadow right there. That's why it's called lady's thumb. It's like a lady stuck her thumb there with some ink on her thumb, I guess. But this is a mild one. It's not hot, and it's fine to eat raw or you know, soup or stew, however you want to do it. And let's not forget about eating muscadine leaves. These are still plenty tender enough to eat. And looky right there. I've got some muscadines starting to grow. Look at that beauty. Look at that beauty right there. That really big pokeweed plant. Normally, you don't want to eat one this big, or you're told not to eat one this big, and I'm definitely not telling you to eat one of this size. Have I been eating some of the higher leaves? Maybe, but I've been boiling them really well if I have. And down here, we have a lot younger ones. I've been watching these, and they came up a lot later, so they're not just runts. They are, in fact, a lot younger of a plant. I've been eating on those too. That is another great nutrient source. Not a good calorie source, but excellent nutrients. You know, a lot of the vitamins and minerals, maybe some of them are water soluble better, and some of them are more fat soluble. So to hedge your bets, when you're eating these plants, you know, drink some water with them, of course. And if you have a fat source, go ahead and eat that as you're eating the plants, so that your body can better pull out those nutrients that you're going to need to be healthy. Here is a pecan tree. Now this is not the time of year to pick pecans, so why am I showing you a pecan tree? Because salt. Pecans, hickories, and walnuts are all in the same family, and they all have a similar pinnately compound leaf. Pinnate means feather-like. See how it's sort of like a feather the way it spreads out? And compound, because this whole thing, let me pull it off. This whole thing is of one leaf. Each of these is a leaflet. They're not a complete leaf unto themselves. The whole thing is one leaf, so it's a compound leaf. And it's pinnately compound because it looks like a feather. And all of the pecans, walnuts, and hickories will have these pinnately compound leaves. And of course, in the fall, they'll have hickories, walnuts, and pecans. But yeah, salt. Salt is really, really important, and if we didn't have enough salt, we would die. That's normally not a problem. Normally our problem is you have too much salt because of all the processed foods or the fast foods, or it just tastes good. And it's advantageous of us to crave salt because in the wild there aren't always all these abundant salt sources. Of course, if you live by the ocean, well, you can evaporate ocean water and get salt. But I'm in Arkansas, and I don't have oceans here. But what I do have here in Arkansas is plants and animals, and I can use both of those as salt sources. Now let's talk about the animals first. This is the one that's more, people would think it's gross, and that's blood. Blood has some salt in it. So if you make a blood sausage, or if you just don't bleed out an animal before you cook it, you're going to get some more salt that way. You ought to be eating all the organ meats anyway, because that's where a lot of the nutrition is. All of this stuff that we Western Americans think of as gross, usually that's the best parts, the healthiest part of the animal. And then plant sources for salt. Well, my friends right here. Pecans, walnuts, and hickories tend to store salt in their roots. They pull it up from the ground, and they tend to have more in there. The way you can access that is by you dig up the roots, cut them up as small as you reasonably can, and then basically decoct them, or make a decoction. Boil the roots in water, and just keep boiling them until that water solution becomes discolored, until it boils down, and it may look kind of gross, but it should have a saltiness. It's not just salt. There's actually a lot of minerals in there, and that's one source of salt. I'm going to make a very broad generalization, and any of you that have plant experience, which is a lot of you, you're going to immediately see several exceptions to this. So just know this is very broad strokes here, very broad strokes. My way of thinking about this is that all of the above ground parts of the plants tend to be where you get more of the vitamins, and then the below ground parts of the plants tend to be where you get more minerals. Again, plenty of exceptions, broad strokes, very generalized and oversimplified. But when you're looking for your mineral content, you want to get your roots, because that's where a lot of your minerals are, and in the roots store them a lot. And then the above ground parts, in the leaves and in the fruits, tend to have more vitamins, basically. But let me tell you about two more plant sources of sodium, and those are they're both roots. One is dandelion roots, and another is yellow dock. The roots of these plants will be excellent sources for multiple minerals and other nutrients. But yes, also sodium that you're going to need. You can't eat them fresh. You need to dry them and then powder it or break it down into smaller pieces. And I'm going to tell you what, it's going to taste nasty. It's just awful. Yep, earthworms. These are not my favorite. I can never get all the grit out of them. I'm going to show you how I prepare it, and Yep, I'm gonna eat one for you. Because that's what all the people want to see, right? There we go. I knew I'd find some oxalis or wood sorrel. You just gotta know where to look. It's not even in a shady spot. It's, well, you know, no, this does get morning shade. That's why it hasn't been cooked. There's several little spots of this out here. Oxalis looks a lot like clover. It doesn't have any poisonous lookalikes, just clover is another lookalike, and that's edible. But you can tell it apart from clover by the leaflets, where clover is more rounded. Oxalis has heart-shaped leaflets. And it's tangy, and it has sort of a lemony taste. And it's pretty good raw. That's really about the only way I ever eat it is raw. You can cook it, nothing wrong with that, but I eat it raw. Now, oxalis and another plant that I'm going to show you over here does have oxalic acid if you're worried about that kind of thing. And I'm not, but, well, that would take us off on a tangent, and I've gone off on enough tangents today. If it was winter, we would tap these for maple syrup. If it was spring, we would eat their seeds. And, well, it's not either one, so we're going to leave them alone. But we could. There's a trick to making the seeds more palatable. There's nothing really wrong with them. They have a little bitterness, as a lot of things do. But there's a trick, and I guess next spring I'm going to have to show you the trick to making them much more palatable. The same would go with elm seeds. Now, actually, elm seeds don't really. It depends on the tree. Depends on which tree you have. But most of those that I've tried, you can eat them plain. You can eat the inner bark off of these too. Why haven't I done that? Now that's a good protein and energy source there. Why have I not gone and sawn off a limb off of an elm tree? Why have I not done that? What am I thinking? Why have I not done that? I should have done that in pine trees, and that would have been a great calorie boost and nutrient source. Well, and then if you look over my front door, you'll see some wasp nests. There's a good yellow jacket nest. And I would show you how I eat the larvae out of those, but I've kind of over-predated the area where I'm running out of wasp nests. And that one, they're building back, but they haven't had a chance to lay eggs and have them start developing yet. So I'm going to let those guys go. I would a lot rather eat wasp larvae than earthworms. The way I do it is I have a soapy water solution. You got to pick the right soap, because if you get the wrong soap, you know, you'll contaminate them and contaminate yourself. I use a Young Living brand of soap. It's essential oils based, and I put it in a garden sprayer, one that has never had any pesticides, and I just spray them a little bit, and the wasps just fall to the ground. Now, they're edible too. I don't really mess with the adult wasps. You know, maybe if I'm on the trail and I come across some that are easy to eat, I might. They're just tough and chewy. There's nothing on them. There's nothing on them but exoskeleton. But the larvae have a sort of a, I guess it would depend on your species and their development rate, but I would describe it as a buttery and mildly sweet flavor, and that's about all. And I eat them raw. You can cook them, but you can also eat them raw without fear of parasites because of their lifestyle. They're just not coming into contact with things that would also infect us. Wow, this road is busy today. It's been really hard to shoot video today. Now these are my friends right here. These are my blackberries. I rescued this plant from a pasture, a cow pasture. They were about to be brush hogged and then sprayed with poison. And so I dug up a couple of the plants and brought them out here, and they have repaid me. I mean, look at that. Look at all those. And as a forager, you have to be adaptable to a changing environment, because it's funny how some plants will come on earlier and some will come on later. Like these blackberries are some of the later ones that come on, where some of the early ones, they're already wrapping up and getting about done, and these are going to pick up partway through the blackberry season and carry me on through the end. And the muscadines, my parents have a vine that one year it was almost Christmas and I was getting muscadines off of that thing. Now it was a very, very warm year. It was a very warm winter, but it's crazy. I may exaggerate. It may have turned December. It wasn't Christmas, but here is one of my yuccas. And yuccas are familiar to a lot of people. Around here in Arkansas, they're found around older homes because they were a popular decorative plant. And then further west in some of the drier places, they're just a common, regular plant. But they have this is a Swiss Army knife plant. You can use the roots for soap. On some of the ones I can have, you can use the leaves for soap, and then you don't have to kill the plant. You can make rope out of the leaves. But our purpose right now is food. And the pods I've already picked off. Those are edible when they're cooked. And I'm going to go take you inside. Let's go back inside and see how to prepare those. Here's a yucca in my neighbor's yard. So you can see them with the pods on there. So you've got to be adaptable and you've got to be ready for change. This field used to have a lot of plantain, it used to have dock, it used to have sheep sorrel, oxalis, lots of clover. And of course, as the seasons change, the plants rotate around, but also when somebody comes and chops that all down and bales it up for hay, well, now your plants have all changed again. It always makes me kind of sad when they cut this down for hay. I understand they got to do it, and if they didn't cut it down, it would eventually grow up into a thicket and then a forest, and then I wouldn't have these plants. But it's still kind of sad. This is my go-to spot for plantain. It grows thick here, and you can see it's still a little bit left. I was going to come out and pick a whole bunch of this to take on the trail in case we got any, bees or wasps after us, because it's really good for stings. I guess I can still get some from here. But plantain has a lot of edible. Actually, everything really is edible on this. The seeds have fiber. It's a plant in this genus that they use to make Metamucil. Psyllium, that's what it is. But they have sort of grass-like leaves in that the veins are parallel all the way down. And they make these nice seed spikes up here. It makes them very identifiable. Beyond that, though, if you're not sure, they have a very distinct taste. And that's hard to describe over video, but they do have a very distinct taste. And once you've got it properly identified, chew it up in your mouth, and then you'll always remember it. And what I tell people, plantain does not have a bad taste. It's just that there's so much of it. So it's better to mix it up with other things, unless you really like that plantain taste. It'll also stain your teeth if you leave it on overnight, but that's a different story. Oh, I have some dandelion back here in the shade. Hooray for me! I will have some dandelion. I might pick some of that and take it on my trip. Not everything's dandelion. There's not a dandelion there. It's a look-alike. Hooray! Now here's another one. These cane plants. On many species of cane are edible in the young shoots. You can take them and peel them and boil them. I haven't done it with my cane plants because I'm actually I'm trying to get it to take over and be kind of a windbreak, and plus, the kids like cutting them down and using them as swords. So I'm trying to let these live a little bit, but when I'm on the trail, I'll definitely have my eyes open because cane is super abundant. I mean, it'll take over. There's, hold still, you plant. It's trying to run away. There's some Bradford pears. A lot of people will say that Bradford pears are not edible, but that's not really right. They are. It's a lot of work for a little tiny pear. A lot of pears aren't ripe right off of the tree. You have to let them sit and ripen off the tree. Or you can cook them and bring out the sweetness, and you can do that with the Bradford pears. Yeah, a lot of people will tell you that Bradford pear is poisonous, and that's kind of technically true in the same way that a regular pear is poisonous. It's the seed. And it's just that they have a cyanide precursor that breaks down in your system. It's not like if you eat one, you're going to die. It's not toxic like that. Oh, let me adjust this. It's just that, you eat too many of them and it can give you a bellyache. I'm sure if you ate enough of them, it could kill you. You'd have to eat, I don't know how many, a bunch. But the pulp to seed ratio is much less favorable on these, so you end up eating more seeds. And so that's why they say it's poisonous. Now here is something a little extra fun. This is a peach tree. It wasn't planted here on purpose. It just came up from a peach pit that somebody threw out. Years and years ago, there were peaches. All over here was peach orchard. So, it could have come from anywhere. But this one does not have any peaches on it this year. But on other years, on wetter years, I have noticed little green peaches. And I've never noticed one get all the way to ripe. But that's a possibility when you're out foraging. This dog is going to come say hi. I'll say hi too. Here we've got a neighbor's pear tree. And I definitely do count this as foraging because they're not eating the pears. This is just, you know, here. It's just ornamental for them. And now these pears, these are not near ripe. Look at how small that is. And this probably won't work because they are so underripe. But since we're here, we're going to go ahead. I'm going to try a trick with these to bring out some of the sweetness. Just keep in mind that these are really, really small. It's really too early for this. But I'm going to show you something we can do to help. Now my main field for harvesting dock got cut down for hay, but I found one here. Let me show you how easy this is to harvest, and then we'll go take this inside and I'll show you how I would process it. Ready? Ta-da! Oh hey, you can eat it just like that. You might want to clean it up a little bit, but it's not toxic. It's just a lot of fiber. It could give you a bellyache. But I'll show you how to get rid of that extra chaff. Okay, so you can put them on a cookie sheet and roast them in the oven. Then, I didn't do that with these, but I'm shortcutting. And also, hey, go through and pick out any like spider webs and stuff. You don't want to eat that, or maybe you do want to eat that, whatever. Then you can take it in your hands and vigorously rub it back and forth. The roasting is not necessary, but it does help to make the casings of the seeds more brittle. It also helps if it's not a really, really windy day outside. But the wind loves when I'm recording. Now this, I'd be closer to done right now if I really had roasted these. Or you can cheat and roast them and then just put them in the blender. Just honestly, put them in the blender and let that break it all up for you. Just blend it until you get a powder. The seed part stays heavier and the hull stays lighter. Okay, so then, this is not working. I really should have roasted these. Okay. Then we're gonna we're gonna get nothing. We're gonna get nothing out of this because I didn't roast them first. I didn't dry them properly and I didn't roast them. You see, you don't take shortcuts. That's the problem. Okay, here's the part you've been waiting for. Trying out these foods that I've been preparing. Let's do this in order of my prediction from best to worst. So I'm going to start off with the yucca pods. Okay? And so, there we go. Overall, as far as a foraging food goes, it's fine. It would be a lot better if you scooped this out and mixed it in with another dish. Mix some of the flavors and textures up. This has a little bit of a crunch. I probably could have cooked it longer and it would have maybe brought out a little more sweetness and been a little more tender, but it's fine. As it is, it has a bit of a crunch, reminiscent of, well, any crunchy vegetable, like a potato, like a snap of a carrot. You can tell it does have a little bit of natural sugar in there. It's not sweet, but you can taste it does have some. Okay. Next, let's do the pear. I am predicting that this will not be good because it really was a very, very unripe pear. To do the trick where you bring out the sweetness on an unripe pear, it needs to be at least reasonably close to ripe. There has to be something there to sweeten. Also, over a campfire, that works really well too. That gives it a nice smoky flavor, sort of a barbecued pear. That's gourmet camp food. But okay, here we go. It's definitely softened. Smell. It's plenty soft enough to eat. Hey, It's not perfect, but it brought it a lot of the way there towards good food. As it is, it's just bland. It's not it's neither that bitter, astringent, you know, unripe pear, pucker you up kind of flavor, nor is it really sweet. It's just sort of a neutral middle ground. And considering what we started with, I'm going to take that as a win. Okay, here it is. This is the part you've been waiting for. This is what you wanted to see, right? You wanted to see the worm. Well, here's the worm. This one is just boiled. I've also roasted them before, and I think this is better. The roasted ones. If I was going to go ahead and work them into another dish, like say dry them out, powder them, and mix them in with a casserole or a soup, yeah, I would probably roast them. But as it is, I think I'm just going to go with boiled, and I'm not going to chew it. I'm not, because I never get all of the grit out. It's really hard to get all of the grit out, and I don't like chewing up the grit. Really, it's not really the flavor. It's not the best flavor, but it's mostly the grit. Okay, here we go, and I have a glass of water. I'm just going to wash it down. Here we go, earthworm. It got stuck halfway down. That's why I had to drink more. The little CT, the little hair-like things on the sides, I got stuck in my throat. I hope you enjoyed that. Remember, you do want to cook earthworms if you're going to eat them, because they're digging around, just eating up soil and decaying matter, and they can come in contact with a lot of parasites and bacteria that you don't want, so you definitely want to cook them. And that was a great protein source. Not all that great a texture, but as far as protein sources go, it was great. Okay. Well, I guess that about wraps up my review of the things that I've been eating and how I've been eating them. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you'll give some of those a try and just experiment with that yourself. And I am rapidly approaching my 2-week foraging survival hike across the Ozark Highlands Trail. I hope that you'll keep up with me by watching the videos, and make sure I don't get eaten by a bear or something. And I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy foraging!